Before you modify your vintage guitar, make sure to watch this full video. Just to my right here, I have a vintage 1969 Fender Telecaster with a factory Bigsby. A few months ago, I played this guitar in original condition. It sounded incredible, but the playability wasn't great. Since then, it's had a professional refret and a new nut installed. But what do changes like these really mean for a vintage guitar? Can they improve the playability of the instrument without compromising what makes the guitar valuable and special? In today's episode, we're gonna find out. So welcome back to Squealing Pig Guitars, the home of luxury strum machines here in Nottingham, England. Let's get straight into it. So let's take a close look at this guitar and answer what it is and what has been done to it. As I mentioned in the intro of the video, this is a 1969 Fender Telecaster with a factory Bigsby, which is pretty cool. The construction is very simple. We have an older body, we have a maple neck and a walnut skunk stripe on the back. This has a nitro finish over a poly undercoat. So when I played this guitar a few months ago, the tone of the pickups was incredible. We have the original Fender 60s pickups in this one, and they're an absolute dream. But I found it was very hard to play complex chord voicings, vibrato, and bend. Also, when I engaged the Bigsby, I found that the strings were kind of binding in the nut a little bit, meaning that we had poor tuning stability. But then this guitar got sold on and the owner decided to do a refret and install a new nut. I was very happy to hear that, as this guitar was in need of it. So I have to say I'm very impressed with the refret and the nut. It's transformed the playability of this guitar. But for those interested in this particular 1969, let me run down the rest of the specs for you. So we've got an older body with that Olympic white finish. In areas you can see where the original kind of white is and obviously where it's kind of aged over the years to this almost yellow kind of buttercream color. We have a 3-ply white pickguard with the original 60s Telecaster pickups. We have an F-branded Bigsby, which was factory, and 1 volume, 1 tone, and a 3-way switch. Moving on to the neck, we have a medium C profile, maple neck with a 25.5-inch scale length. These were replaced with medium jumbo frets, and we of course have that new nut. Moving on to the headstock, everything's original here. We have the F-branded tuners, and we have that lovely black Fender logo. We have the original case. Let's have a look at the case candy. So we have some super cool 60s paperwork. We have the cover for the bridge, and we have the original frets and nut. So to answer the question, does this guitar play better with the maintenance mods? The answer is a resounding yes. This guitar has been transformed from something that was fairly unplayable to an instrument now that will not hold you back. So does this 1969 Telecaster actually play any better with the mods that have been done to it? The last time I played this guitar, it was barely playable, especially when you're doing bends. So let's test it out now. Straight off the bat, I would not be able to do this last time. And straight away, that's why you should refret a vintage guitar, in my opinion, because it's so easy to bend and vibrato. This guitar had a great tone last time I played it. The pickups in this guitar sound great, but the new fret job is just allowing me to play easier and allow me to express myself better. And the nut is keeping the whole thing in tune really nicely. Let's hear the neck pickup. I remember this pickup sounding great last time. What a lovely neck pickup tone this guitar has. One of the best telly tones I've heard. It's got a really nice kind of compressed sound to it, but you can dig in and get that classic kind of telly twang. But if you lighten down the picking a little bit, you can get a lovely kind of neo-soul jazz tone. It's just way easier to play now, and I am noticing that it's staying in tune a lot better, especially when I use the Bigsby. Previously it was going out a little bit when I was playing with the Bigsby, and it generally just was harder to play as an instrument. can hear that it's pretty much staying in tune, which is great to see. Let's play some fingerstyle. If I put the spark booster on, this is the tone I get on the bridge pickup. Lovely tone. Let's hear the neck one more time for some lead playing. There's quite a lot of uncontrollable feedback on the neck pickup, mainly because of how much gain and how loud it is in the room, but obviously it is a vintage guitar, so it's not going to be as capable of dealing with higher gain frequency. Just before we finish up the tone demonstration, I'm just going to show you the simple clean tones for those that are interested. So I'll go neck, middle, and bridge, and then we'll do a quick loop before finishing up the tone demonstration. Neck, middle, very nice, bridge. Really nice clean tones there, and again the guitar is staying in tune a lot better and it's so much easier to play. At the start of this section, I asked the question, does this 1969 Telecaster play better as a result of the mods that have been done to it? And the answer is a massive yes. This guitar is a completely different beast now. It plays 10 times better. It still sounded good last time I played it. Now that they resolved the issue with the frets and the nut, it's an absolute dream to play. And I think this plays just as good as any custom shop Telecaster that you'd pick up from a master builder. So I think this makes for a great case that you should mod your vintage guitar. If you're a player, you have to put new frets on your vintage guitar if, there's no frets left. It changes the playing experience completely. So I'm a big fan of this 1969 Telecaster now it's had a refret. It was definitely worth doing the mods. Let's finish off with a loop. So at this point in the video, you might be asking, how does modding affect the value of a vintage instrument? I think it's an interesting conversation as it's not a black and white answer. So I've loaded up Reverb here and we're gonna have a look at some listings to kind of decipher what is acceptable as a mod for a vintage guitar and what is not acceptable. So the first one I see is this 1967 Fender Custom Telecaster. So straight off the back, we have modified pickups, we have an amateur refinish on this guitar, and it's definitely not what an original one would look like. The neck is stamped with 67, which is what we'd like to see. But But as we can see, this guitar is listed at £6,613. That is a massive discount off a 1967 Telecaster. In all original condition, a 1967 Telecaster could fetch upwards of £20,000. So there's a massive discount here, and that's obviously because of the amateur refinish and the replaced pickups. So of course, the modifications that were done to this guitar are way more dramatic than the guitar that we have today. But this is your first warning sign. If you do have a vintage guitar, don't replace the pickups to something crazy, don't refinish it. This is gonna massively affect the value, bringing it down considerably. But what happens when your vintage guitar doesn't play any good anymore? What happens when the frets are worn? What happens when it doesn't stay in tune? What can you do that is seen acceptable in the vintage guitar market? A refret and a replacement nut will reduce collector originality. But if the work is done well and to a professional standard like the guitar we have today, then it can significantly improve the player experience and actually increase demand with players. Whether that is a gain or a loss is dependent on whether you're a player or a collector. These mods would be seen as maintenance rather than a destructive mod like we saw on Reverb, but it can still affect the price depending on the buyer. At the end of the day, with the new frets and the new nut, this guitar is no longer original. However, the impact to the overall cash value is modest rather than dramatic. However, if the refret and the nut replacement is really bad quality and isn't up to a professional standard, then this can heavily affect the value of the guitar. So guitarists, we're at the end of another Squealing Pig Guitars video. I really hope you've enjoyed this one today. Before I go into my conclusion for this video, make sure to leave a thumbs up if you've enjoyed this vintage guitar episode. Hit the hype points button and let me know down below, would you modify your vintage guitar? Would you give it a refret, or would you go further and make it personal to you? Or do you think it's completely sacrilege and we should leave vintage guitars the way they were? Let me know down below. And finally, if you're new to Squealing Pig Guitars, make sure to hit that big red subscribe button. We're on the road to 100,000 subscribers and we could definitely use your help, so make sure to hit that subscribe button if you enjoy our content. So with everything considered in today's episode, would I modify a vintage guitar? I would say yes, only if the modifying was to improve the player experience. So for example, a refret, a nut replacement, maybe replacing some hardware which may have rusted or fallen through. However, I wouldn't do any cosmetic changes or any major modification. For example, I wouldn't change the pickups, I wouldn't refinish the guitar, I'd keep it the way it was, as that's what makes a vintage guitar so special. In my opinion, the owner that refretted this guitar and put a new nut on it has made this guitar 10 times the instrument it was that I played a few months ago. We'd consider these modifications maintenance mods. They're not necessarily changing the guitar, they're just preserving the playing experience and making sure that players can actually play it. After our discovery on Reverb, I think a lot of dealers are opening up to the fact that refretting a vintage guitar is for the better. Although it may drop a little bit in value, I personally prefer a guitar I can actually play rather than a guitar that has no frets on it. It's just like changing your strings. As soon as they're worn down, you need a new set. The new nut was absolutely essential for the Bigsby as well. This guitar now stays in tune, whereas I can recall a couple of months ago it not staying in tune. But that is enough for today. Thank you so much for watching this Squealing Pig Guitars video, and I'll see you again shortly for another one. But until then, keep rocking, guys. I'll see you soon.